you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. A people without knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. Men who are earnest, but not afraid of their consequences. They try to put my soul in a black hole, but didn't realize this melanin is gold. That's why I shine with this little light of mine.
Let's get it. 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 You're now tuned into Civics for the Culture, hosted by me, Bennie, aka Poeticlee Williams III. And we're here for another day of lessons. We're here for another day of education. We're here for another day of insightful, resourceful information that can guide us to being knowledgeable about this system, knowledgeable about this government, the policies, the politics that go on, and the different laws that are created and kind of structured to be against and hinder people of color. And that's the whole goal right here. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a politician. However, I'm someone just like you that has access to information that can be educated and aware of our history and why we are in the positions that we're in. You know, what's today we're going to talk about Dred Scott v. Sandford, and kind of the spark and the ball on how that started to roll towards the Civil War, the Reconstruction period, and how that started going. And really the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, which 13th we're definitely gonna have an episode on how that reflects towards Black people, and even how the 5th Amendment kind of went against Black people and categorized us as property, right? So we're gonna talk about that today. I'm gonna read an article on 13.org. This article was written by Alex McBride, a third-year law student at Tulane Law School in New Orleans. This was actually wrote this back in 2005. Yeah, 2005. So I'm gonna read this article. Talks about the Dred Scott v. Sandford case and kind of gives details on, once again, how the Fifth Amendment categorized us as property. And what I mean us, I'm talking about black. Excuse me. I'm talking about Black people categorize us as property, and how it kind of then launched the 13th and 14th Amendment as well. So let's get into it. You may wonder, what is the Dred Scott v. Sandford case, right? So this case right here, Dred Scott v. Sandford, it was argued in 1856 and decided in 1857. The Supreme Court ruled that Americans of African descent, whether free or slave, were not American citizens and could not sue in federal court. Wonder why. The court also ruled that Congress lacked power to ban slavery in the U.S. territories. Damn. Finally, the court declared that rights of slave owners were constitutionally protected by the Fifth Amendment because slaves were categorized as property. All right, now let's get to the controversy, which began in 1833 when Dr. John Emerson, a surgeon with the U.S. Army, purchased Dred Scott, a slave, and eventually moved Scott to a base in the Wisconsin Territory. Slavery was banned in the territory pursuant to the Missouri Compromise. We'll get into the Missouri Compromise. But slavery was banned in that territory. Scott lived there for the next 4 years, hiring himself out of work during the long stretches when Emerson was away. In 1840, Scott, his new wife, and their young children moved to Louisiana and then to St. Louis with Emerson. Emerson died in 1843, leaving the Scott family to his wife, Eliza Irene Sandford. In 1846, after laboring and saving for years, the Scotts sought to buy their freedom from Sandford, but she refused. Dred Scott then sued Sandford in a state court, arguing that he was legally free because he and his family had lived in a territory where slavery was banned. In 1850, the state court finally declared Scott free. Come on now. However, Scott's wages had been withheld pending the resolution of his case. And during that time, Miss Emerson remarried and left her brother, John Sandford, to deal with her affairs. So she's like, look here, I'm out of here. Bro, you can handle this right here. We all know how that goes when you pass something off to the family member. They're like, yo, look here, I ain't dealing with this. So John Sandford to deal with her affairs. Mr. Sandford, unwilling to pay back the wages owed to Scott, appealed the decision to the Missouri Supreme Court. So he's like, look here, I'm not paying back these wages. I wasn't the one who had them. Man, this is nasty. This is wild. So he appealed this decision to the Missouri Supreme Court. The court overturned the lower court's decision, which, remember, the lower court's decision was that Scott was free man. So the court now overturned the lower court's decision and ruled in favor of Sandford. Scott then filed another lawsuit in a federal circuit court claiming damages against Sandford's brother, John F.A. Sandford, for Sandford's alleged physical abuse against him. The jury ruled that Scott could not sue in federal court because he had already been deemed a slave under Missouri law, which, if you go back, slavery was banned in the territory due to the Missouri Compromise. So, man. All right, so let's go here. Slave under the Missouri law. So if we go, I actually want to read a little bit of the Missouri Compromise real quick. Let me just read a little bit of it because I think that definitely adds a little bit more to the story too. What is the Missouri Compromise? A little bit about it. So in 1820, amid growing sectional tensions over the issues of slavery, the U.S. Congress passed a law that admitted Missouri to the Union as a slave state and Maine as a free state, while banning slavery from the remaining Louisiana purchased lands located north of the 3630, that's the longitude latitude parallel. The Missouri Compromise, as it was known, would remain in force for just over 30 years before it was repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. In 1854. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled the compromise unconstitutional in the Dred Scott case, setting the stage for the nation's final path towards civil war. So that's right there about the Missouri Compromise. So when it goes back, it wasn't banned in Missouri, it was banned in Wisconsin. That's what he was. He was in Wisconsin. So, but because he lived in Missouri, if I go back right here, where were they? Yes, because they were in Missouri. That's why. All right. So nasty case. So when they went in St. Louis. All right. So going back here, being deemed a slave under Missouri law, Scott appealed to the U.S. So let me go back right here. The jury ruled that Scott could not sue in federal court because he had already been deemed a slave under Missouri law. Scott appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which reviewed the case in 1856. Due to a clerical error at the time, Sandford's name was misspelled in court records. You know how that goes, clerical or error, sure. The Supreme Court in an infamous opinion written by Chief Justice Roger B. Taney ruled that it lacked jurisdiction to take Scott's case because Scott was, or at least had, been a slave. First, the court argued that they could not entertain Scott's case because federal courts, including the Supreme Court, are courts of peculiar and limited jurisdiction. So you may wonder, what is that? What is peculiar and limited jurisdiction? Let's look that up. Peculiar. I think these are things where you just have to look up because it's like, what are you really saying? So peculiar legal definition of peculiar. So what is this kind of mean? I'm going to read this kind of just off the fly right here. Let's see here. All right. So which has within itself, independent of the ordinary jurisdiction, power to grant probate of wills and the like. So a peculiar parish or church which has within itself independent of the ordinary jurisdiction. So independent of the ordinary jurisdiction. So it couldn't do anything on the federal level. So when it says right here, first, the court argued that they could not entertain Scott's case because federal courts, including Supreme Court, are courts of peculiar. They cannot interfere with each other. Basically, what they're saying back there, and may only hear cases brought by select parties involving limited claims. For example, under Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, Federal courts may only hear cases brought by citizens of the United States. You get that? You get that? Because Scott was not a citizen. He was a property. The court ruled that because Scott was a Negro whose ancestors were imported into this country and sold as slaves, and thus, not a member of the political community formed and brought into existence by the Constitution, Scott was not a citizen and had no right to file a lawsuit in federal court. Man, here he is, a human. He has 2 eyes, 2 legs. He walks, he eats, he talks. He does everything just like you. However, he's not classified as a citizen. He's only classified as property because in certain states he was classified as a slave, which means that he's not a citizen. This is America. This is America right here. This is America. Second, the court argued that Scott's status as a citizen of a free state did not necessarily give him status as a U.S. citizen. While the states were free to create their own citizenship criteria and had done so before the Constitution even came into being. The Constitution gives Congress exclusive authority to define national citizenship. Moreover, the court argued that even if Scott was deemed free under the laws of a state, he was still not qualified as an American citizen because he was Black. The court asserted that in general, U.S. citizens are only those who were members of the political community at the time of the Constitution's creation. Damn. So, hey, yeah, you can be a citizen over there in that state, but really you ain't a U.S. citizen. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, because your ancestors just weren't part of the political community at the time of the Constitution's creation. Along with those individuals' heirs, and slaves were not a part of this community. Finally, the court argued that in any case, Scott could not be defined as free by virtue of his residency in the Wisconsin Territory because Congress lacked the power to ban slavery in U.S. territories. The court views slaves as property, and the Fifth Amendment forbids Congress from taking property away from individuals without just compensation. Justice Benjamin Curtis issued a strong dissent. The decision in Dred Scott v. Sandford exacerbated rising sectional tensions between the North and the South. Although the Missouri Compromise had already been repealed prior to the case, the decision nonetheless appeared to validate the Southern version of the national power and to embolden pro-slavery Southerners to expand slavery to all reaches of the nation. Unsurprisingly, anti-slavery forces were outraged by the decision, empowering the newly formed Republican Party and helping fuel violence between slave owners and abolitionists on the frontier. Following the Civil War, the Reconstruction Congress passed, and the states ratified the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, all which directly overturned Dred Scott's decision. Today, all people born or naturalized in the United States are American citizens who may bring suit in federal court. Read that one more time. Today, actually, let me go all the way back. Not all the way back to the beginning, right here. Following the Civil War, the Reconstruction Congress passed and the states ratified the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, all of which directly overturned the Dred Scott decision. Today, all people born or naturalized in the United States are American citizens who may bring suit in federal court. And our reason, once again, I wanted to go back to that is because the court's decision in Dred Scott v. Sandford's holding that Blacks could not be U.S. citizens, it started this tension between South and North because they're like, look here, you guys have free labor down here. We have to pay up here. But I mean, more importantly, it changed the narrative of who and what we are. And that's what we have to continue changing throughout time. That's the point of reading these cases, reading these stories, learning about organizations. We talked about move organizations that fought for the revolution, not just of Black people and people of color, but for all humans here on this land. This land is stolen. And I'm going to say that every show. This land is stolen. So we have to understand that because we have to constantly work on the narrative of who and what we are. If you were classified once, imagine this. 1857. We still have generations of descendants from those families that still live on with this mind state. Your ancestors not too long ago was classified and categorized as property, what do you think that carries on for your image? Why do you think people naturally look at you and talk to you and make you feel like we talked about the Jim Crow etiquette? This furthermore is the Jim Crow etiquette of how people talk to you, how people think of you. If you were categorized as property. So that's the importance of learning our histories, because you got to understand things don't just change overnight. Yeah, laws can be changed, but there's an etiquette and there's a mindset that rolls and rolls and rolls, works its way into the DNA of generations. So we ourselves must look at each other as humans. We ourselves must understand this history that's going on around us, because look, I'd be damned if somebody thinks of me as property. But that's why we have to work and let our voice be heard, so that we then can be like Dred Scott and argue for our rights. And that's the other thing too, is there's a legal way to go about this. We can get pissed off and we can go violent, but at the same time, these courts are set up. The system is already set up. So we got to move strategic within the system. We have to be smart within the system. We have to know the laws. I'm going to talk more about the 13th Amendment. We have to know these different compromises. We have to know what's really in the language of these things, right? And that's what we're going to do here. Dred Scott v. Sandford. This was I would say, one of the balls to get things moving, obviously with the Civil War, which we're going to get more into, in the Reconstruction period. The reason I want to get into more of the Reconstruction period is because we're going to a Reconstruction time period of ourselves. So it's important in order to see the future, we must know the past as well. That way it can give clarity to our present, and that way we can move forward with the passion into our future. Let's do that. Let's be strong. Let's be resilient, and let's be loud, and let's be strategic every day, every moment that we can. This is Civics for the Culture right here on Watch Lotus X. I go by the name of Bennie, aka Poeticlee. You can follow me at POETICLEE. Watch Lotus X, the network. We're going to do this work every day, baby. Come on with me. Come on. Till next time, I appreciate you. This was the Dred Scott v. Sandford case. We're going to talk about the Reconstruction period later on. But until next time, thank you and much love.